Hey guys, how's it going today? All right, I'm gonna do the Jack the Ripper. Kind of been neglecting that. Sorry, I haven't been around much. I have been sick for a while. I don't know, I keep getting sick and then not sick, and between that and then it's been nice out. So when I'm not sick, I've been busy, but I need to get into this because I don't want to forget like the whole story here. All right, so I'm just gonna read this chapter 11 to catch us up here. All right, so chapter 11, October 18th. Nope, October 1888. Will the unknown killer strike again? October 1888 had opened a nerve-wracking note with the fresh horror of the double event, the Jack the Ripper missives, and the huge press coverage, both matters endangered. Nope, engendered. Sorry, apparently I can't read today. With this media frenzy came a veritable flood of correspondence in the newspapers, not only hoax letters spawned in the fevered imagination of pretender rippers, but also well-meaning advice from every quarter on how to lay the killer by his heels and the inevitable false claims and rumors. The Evening Post of Saturday, 6th October 1888, carried the following snippet. The second rumor was even worse than the one cited above, for it had absolutely no foundation, but the details of the apprehension are, under the circumstances, decidedly amusing as a clever concoction. It appears that a few minutes before midnight, a cab containing two men and a woman was seen to pass along Brick Lane, not one of the best thoroughfares in Spitalfields, and stop in a dark portion of the lane. The two men bore the body of the unconscious woman from the cab and deposited it on the pavement, afterwards re entering the vehicle and rapidly driving away. This incident, is later transpired, was nothing more than a drunken brawl, which, because of the murders, had become garbled in the telling. Although there were no Whitechapel murders in the mouth of October 1888, the newspapers were full of reports on the hunt for the murder and suspects. The torso of a woman was also found in the cellar of the new Scotland Yard building, at this time under construction, on the embankment on 2nd October 1888, and this discovery became known as the Whitehall mystery. There are various reports in the official files for this month, and those worthy of note will be mentioned. Many suspects were detained and questioned. Charles Ludwig, who had been detained on Tuesday, 18 September 1888, finally appeared before the Thames Magistrates Court after the murder of Strides and Eddowes. The disposal of this case on 2nd October 1888 was reported in the Times the Wednesday, 3rd October 1888. Charles Ludwig, 40, a decently attired German who professed not to speak English, was brought up on remand, charged with threatening to stab Elizabeth Burns, an unfortunate at 53 Flower and Dean Street, Spitalfields, and also was threatening to stab Alexander Finlay of 51 Lehman Street, Whitechapel. Elizabeth Burns stated about 3:30 on the early morning of Tuesday week. She went with the prisoner up Butcher's Row, Whitechapel Road. Prisoner put his arm around her neck, and she saw an open knife in his hand. She screamed, and two policemen came. The evidence of Finlay showed at 3 o'clock on the morning of Tuesday fortnight, he was standing at a coffee stall in the Whitechapel Road when Ludwig came up in a state of intoxication. He pulled out a long bladed knife and threatened to stab witness with it. Ludwig followed witnesses round the stall and made several attempts to stab him. A constable came up and a prisoner was given into custody. Evidence was given that on the way to the police station, the prisoner dropped a long bladed knife, which was open, and when he was searched, a razor and a long bladed pair of scissors were found on him. Inspector Prinley, H Division, stated the prisoner had fully accounted for his whereabouts on the nights of the recent murders. The magistrate, taking into consideration that the prisoner had been in custody a fortnight, now allowed him to be discharged. So, like, there's another killer. It's bizarre. The following was contained in the police court columns of the Times of Thursday, 4th October 1888. Police. At the Gouth Hall, William Bull, 27, was charged on his own confession with having committed the murder in Mitre Square, Aldgate. Inspector George Izzard said at 20 minutes to 11 on Tuesday night, the prisoner came into the charge room at Bishopsgate Police Station and made the following statement. William Bull, number 6, Stannard Road, Dalston. I am a medical student at the London Hospital. I wish to give myself up for the murder in Aldgate on Saturday night last or Sunday morning. About 2, I think, I met the woman in Aldgate. I went with her up a narrow street not far from the main road. I gave her half a crown. While walking along together, a second man came up, and he took the half crown from her. The prisoner then said, My poor head, I shall go mad. I have done it. I must put up with it. The inspector then said to him, What has become of your clothing that you had on when you committed the murder? He replied, If you wish to know, they are in the Leah, and the knife I threw away. At this point, he declined to say anything more. He was drunk. Inquiries have been made at the London hospital. No such person as the prisoner was known there. He was out of employment. The prisoner's parents appeared to be most respectable people. His father stated that the accused was at home on Saturday night. The prisoner, I said, this when I was mad drunk. I never committed a murder. I could not commit such an act. The magistrate, I shall remind you, and you have yourself to thank for the position you were in. The prisoner was then removed to the cells. The Morning Advertiser of Thursday, 4th October 1888, page 5F, reported on another suspect. So that's crazy. Okay, so this guy got drunk and then claimed that he killed Catherine Eddowes, I believe. Wow. Soon after 6 o'clock last evening, considerable excitement was caused in the neighborhood of Ratcliffe Highway by the report that a man was roaming about there in a suspicious manner with bloodstains on his coat. A crowd gathered, followed the individual referred to, uttering threatening cries. He was respectably dressed in a light suit, was apparently about 30 years of age, and he had somewhat the appearance of an American. He took shelter in a public house and accompanied another man to whom he was known, but the crowd still hung about the doors. At last, a policeman appeared, who advised the man to go with him to the station and wait there until the noisy crowd had disappeared. This the man did readily, accompanying the constable to the King David police station. When he was allowed to sit in an anteroom, the inspector on duty thought it was necessary to question the man, whose replies were considered quite satisfactory. The stains on his coat were carefully scrutinized, but were caused apparently only by grease. At any rate, they were not bloodstains. For a considerable time, the police station was besieged by curious spectators, who at last, long tired of seeing nothing, and so dispersed. The man who said his name was John Locke, and his age 32, made the following statement to a reporter. I am now a sailor and belong to the Naval Reserve. I and my wife have been in Australia for some years. We came to England on the 28th April last. I left a friend's house at 85 Balcombe Street, Dorset Square, this Wednesday morning, and made my way to the docks at Wapping for the purpose of finding a ship. I was walking along Commercial Road to go down Devonshire Road to see a man whom I knew 9 years ago, when all at once I met a friend. He said to me, Helloa, old man, what is all this? And he turned around to the crowd which was following me and told them to go away. I looked round and saw that I had been followed. I said we would go up Commercial Road and have a drink at a public house, the Victory, I think. While we were there, the crowd stopped outside calling Leather Apron and Jack the Ripper, and someone was good enough to send for a couple of policemen. When I got to the station, I explained that I had been doing, but the reporter, the people outside say that you have bloodstains on your coat and collar. Oh, replied Locke, smiling. Those stains are old paint stains, and that only shows what the public will do now. Up to this point, he did not seem to understand that he was at liberty to leave the station, but the officer explained to him that he might go on his way as soon as he liked, but that it would be wise to wait until the crowd had dispersed. Mr. Matthews was engaged for several hours yesterday at the Home Office with reference to the murders at the East End, and in prolonged interviews with Sir Charles Warren and others on the subject, during which the course of action already taken by the police was fully considered, as well as the steps to be taken in future with a view to the discovery of the criminal. Mr. Matthews is understood to have directed that no power in the hands of the police should be left untried, and no clue, however unpromising, neglected. The understanding between the Metropolitan and City Police is most cordial. Yesterday, the large force of police and detectives drafted into the Whitechapel, made house-to-house visitation, and left copies of the following handbill. The wording of the police notice to the occupier leaflet was then given. The question of offering a reward for information leading to the capture of the murder arose. A file cover, dated 1st October 1888. And it was for check $300. Request that the sum may be offered as a reward in the name of the government for the detection of the criminal. Telegram from SOS Within. Also memos by Mr. Pemberton. Copy of Mr. Pemberton's reply below. There is then affixed to the minutes section a cutting from the newspaper. The following correspondence has passed between the editor of the Financial News and the Home Office. Sir, in view of your refusal to offer a reward out of government funds for the discovery of the perpetrator or perpetrators of the recent murders in East End of London, I am instructed on behalf of several readers at the Financial News, whose names and addresses I enclose, to forward you the accompanying check of $300 and to request that you offer that sum for this purpose in the name of the government. Awaiting the favor of your reply, I have the honor to be your obedient servant, Harry H. Marks, the Right Hon. Henry Matthews, MP, Secretary of the State for the Home Department. October 1st. My dear sir, I am directed by Mr. Matthews to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of the state containing a check for $300, which you say that has been contributed on behalf of several readers of the financial news, and which you are desirous should be offered as a reward for the discovery of the recent murders in the East End of London. If Mr. Matthews had been of an opinion that the offer of a reward in these cases would have been attended by any useful result, he would himself have at once made such an offer, but he is not of that opinion. Under these circumstances, I am directed to return you the check which I enclosed, and to thank you and the gentlemen whose names you have forwarded for the liberty of their offer, which Mr. Matthews much regrets he is unable to accept. I am, sir, your obedient servant, E. Lee Pemberton. And this was the Times, the 2nd of October, 1888. There is then annexed a memo as follows. Memoranda by Mr. Pemberton to the Whitechapel murders and proposed offer of reward. I don't understand why they won't allow this reward. I really don't. People are paying out of their own pockets who read these newspapers. They're offering rewards for the general public to help. I don't understand why that's a bad thing. You think it would work? Mr. Matthews, you will have got my telegram saying that Financial News has sent a check for 300 proposing that it should be offered in the name of the government as a reward for the discovery of the Whitechapel murders. As there have been 2 past cases since you declined to offer a reward, I did not like to act without giving you the opportunity if you saw fit to change. And I have not yet answered the letter. At 3 o'clock, Warren came and reported that everything was being done that they could think of, and that he was sanguine of finding the man. About 3:30, the Queen telephoned to express her the Queen telephoned to section of expressing her deleted how shocked she was and asking for information. I telephoned back to Major Edwards stating that Warren had told the HO. At 5 o'clock, Sir Chas Warren sent the word that the Lord Mayor had offered $500 reward. In the Dynamite case, the city offered 5,000 reward, and yet Sir W. Hancourt refused to offer anything on behalf of the government or to promise a pardon to an accomplice. I send the papers for reference. Of course, if I had known that Mayor was going to offer a reward, I should have let you know when I was telephoning that, as I have no doubt there will many more applications about a reward, and most likely the Queen will telegraph again for information. Perhaps you will be so good as to telegraph to me general instructions to act on the previous applications or otherwise, unless you think it better necessary to come up and have an interview with Sir Chas Warren. This was dated October 1st, 1888. Just received your telegram. Sir Chas Warren still adheres to his opinion that a reward, I don't know what WD means, that a reward WD, period, be of no use, and Mr. Monroe agrees ELP. I will come to London tomorrow on Wednesday and be at the HO soon after. I propose to see C. Warren. The financial newsletter is annexed. Sir, in view of your refusal to offer a reward out of government funds for the discovery of the perpetrator or perpetrators of the recent murders in East End of London, I am instructed on behalf of several readers of the financial news whose names and addresses I enclose to forward you the accompanying check for 300 and to request you to offer that sum for this purpose in the name of the government. Awaiting the favor of your reply, I have the honor to be your obedient servant, Henry H. Marks. He's the editor of the newspaper. There are also 2 post office telegraphs, the second being a continuation of the message, and that goes as follows. Post office telegraphs, handed in at Rowland's Castle at 4:57 p.m. To Mr. Pemberton, Home Office, Whitechapel, London. Decline offer with thanks, and say that if government, any prospect of useful result from reward, they would at once offer one themselves. Ask police at once whether any circumstances make it desirable to offer reward now or later. The question of a reward was also raised by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee dated 2nd October 1888. Petition for Her Majesty from various residents in the East End of London praying that a government reward will be offered, urging the exceptional circumstances in connection with these murders pressing. Say that the petition has been laid before the Queen, but that the Softs, though desirous, he has given directions that no effort or expense is to be spared in endeavoring to discover the person guilty of the murders, has not been able to advise HM that in his beliefs, the end of justice will be promoted by any departure from the decision already announced with regard to the proposal that a reward should be offered by the government. They're really harping on this government thing. I mean, if everybody's offering a reward and they all do it together, why not? I don't get it. There are then annexed two newspaper cuttings dated 8th October 1888 from the Times on Monday, 8th October 1888. In answer to the petition to Her Majesty presented by Mr. George Lusk on behalf of his Vigilance Committee and inhabitants of Whitechapel generally, the following letter was received late on Saturday night. Sir, the Secretary of State for the Home Department has had the honor to lay before the Queen the petition signed by you, praying that a reward may be offered by the government for the discovery of the perpetrator of the recent murders in Whitechapel. And he desires me to inform you that though he has given directions that no effort or expense should be spared in endeavoring to discover the persons guilty of the murders, he has not been able to advise Her Majesty that in his belief, the ends of justice will be promoted by any departure from the decision already announced. With regard to the proposal that a reward should be offered by government, I am, sir, your obedient servant. And that's from E. Lee Pemberton. This is from the Daily Telegraph, Monday, 8th October 1888, with reference to the above letter. The gentleman to whom the above reply was addressed, Mr. George Lusk of Alderney Street, Globe Street, Mile End, has given information of a suspicious incident which befell him on Thursday afternoon last. A stranger who called at his private residence shortly after 4 o'clock, and who was informed that Mr. Lusk was not at home, appeared to have traced the president of the Vigilance Committee to an adjacent tavern. Having manifested great interest in the movements of the volunteer police, he sought an interview in a private room, but owing to the forbidding appearance of the visitor, Mr. Lusk seems to have preferred the comparative publicity of the bar parlor. The conversation had scarcely begun when Mr. Lusk, who was about to pick up a pencil, who had dropped from the table, says he noticed the stranger make a swift though silent movement with his right hand towards his side pocket. Fearing that his conduct was observed, it is added that the man asked to be directed to nearest coffee house and forthwith proceeded to an address in the Mile End Road, with which he was supplied. Although Mr. Lusk followed without loss of time, he was not quick enough for his visitor, who absentained from visiting the coffee house and has not been heard of since. The man is described as between 30 and 40 years of age, about 5'9" in height, of a florid complexion and bushy brown beard, whiskers, and mustache. In the absence of further evidence, it is possible to say whether any personal injury was actually in store for the head of the vigilance. But the ease with which the man escaped has awakened the members of the committee and their colleagues to an increased sense of the difficulty of the task that they have in hand. Dear Ruggles Bryce, the enclosed reached us this morning, and I forwarded it to you. For that information of Mr. Matthews, we have, of course, sent no reply from here. Yours very truly, Fleetwood I. Edwards. Captain Fleetwood Edwards was an inquiry to the Queen. This is followed by the previous mentioned petition. To Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen. The humble petition of George Lusk, of numbers 1, 2, and 3, Alderney Road, in the parish of Mile End, Old Town, in the country of Middlesex, builder and contractor, a member of the Metropolitan Board of Works, a vestryman of the above named parish, and the president and chairman of the Vigilance Committee formed for the purpose hereunder mentioned. Here said petitioner, acting under the authority and on behalf of the inhabitants of the East End districts of Your Majesty's metropolis. 1. That Your Majesty's Secretary of State for the Home Department has for some years past discontinued the old practice of offering a government reward for the apprehension and conviction of those offenders against your sovereign majesty, your crown, and dignity who have escaped detection for the crime of the murder. 2. That in the course of the present year, 1888, no less than 4 murders of your majesty's subjects have taken place within a radius of half a mile from one point in the said district. Number 3, that notwithstanding the constitution of the Scotland Yard Detective Office and the efforts of the trained detectives of such office, the perpetrator or perpetrators of these outrages against your majesty will still remain undiscovered. Number 4, the acting under the direction of your majesty's liege, subject to your petitioner. I cause to be sent to your Majesty's Secretary of State for the Home Department a suggestion that he should revert to the original system of a reward, looking at the fact that the present series of murders are probably the work of one hand, and the third and the fourth were certainly the work of the hand that one hand, and that inasmuch as the ordinary means of detection had failed, that the murderer would in all probability commit other murders of a like nature, such offer of reward at the earliest opportunity was absolutely necessary for securing your majesty's subject from death at the hands of the above one undetected assassin. Number 5. That in reply to such suggestion, your petitioner received from your majesty's secretary of state for the home department a letter of which the following is a copy. Sir, I'm directed by the secretary of state to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of the 16th. With reference to the question of the offer of a reward for the discovery of the perpetrator at the recent murders in Whitechapel, and I am to inform you that the Secretary of State considered the case a proper one for the offer of reward. He would at once have offered one on behalf of the government, but that the practice of offering rewards for the discovery of criminals was discontinued some years ago because experience showed that such offers of reward tended to produce more harm than good, and the Secretary of State is satisfied that there is nothing in the present case to justify departure from this rule. I am, sir, your obedient servant, Lee Pemberton. And number 6, that the reply above quoted was submitted to the inhabitants of the East End of London in meeting assembled and provoked a considerable amount of hostile criticism, and that such criticism was your Majesty's subjects at large, but with one or two exceptions, the entire press of Great Britain. Your petitioner therefore humbly prays your Majesty as follows. 1, that your Majesty will gracefully accede to the prayer of your petitioner, preferred originally through your Majesty's Secretary of State, and the direct that a government reward sufficient in amount to meet the particular they spell weird. It's not agencies, exigencies. That doesn't even make sense. Agencies of the case that may immediately be offered your petitioner and those loyal subjects whom he represents, being convinced that without such a reward, the murder or murders of the above 4 victims will not only remain undetected, but will sooner or later commit other crimes of a like nature. And your petitioner will ever pray, etc. George Lusk, 123 Alderney Road, Mile End Road East. Geo B. Richards, witness to the above signature of George Lusk, the petitioner, 28 Sandal Street, Shelford, Essex, 27th September, 1888. There then follows a letter, dated 19th of October, 1888. Telegraphic address, Queen Chester. Queen Hotel, Chester, October 19th, 1888. Dear Murdoch, there's one case of successful reward omitted from my memo which it would be well to add, and it was a case of a burglary in Cromwell Road in which a postman was shot but not killed. I don't think it was in the list made by the registry. If it was not mentioned as a case where the reward was paid. I think it would be well to have it looked, but a Sir C. Warren may mention it as clear of a reward producing important information, but I remember right, it was private information, not evidence at all. The case occurred in 81, 82, or 83. Sorry, I did not think of it while I was at work in the memo, and I have to trouble you with it, but in a question of this sort, we must be as safe and complete as possible. Yours truly, C.E. Troop. There then follows lengthy memos, 6 pages discussing rewards, which, as they are not directly relevant to the Whitechapel murders, but simply concern the merits of offering a reward, will not be reproduced. In these memos, the case of Mullins and the murder of Miss Emsley in Grove Road, Victoria Park, in August 1860. The case of Charles Williams and the burglary in Cromwell Road on 5th February 1881, and the wounding of a postman, and Reverend MacDonald and others in 1746 are discussed. A note is then appended, dated 8th October 1888. Mr. Murdoch, do you know how this came here? Did Mr. Williamson or Sir C.W. bring it? If so, did they make any verbal communication or recommendation on the subject? I do not know. The next folio carries a post office telegram. Home Office 8, October 88. Handed in at the Cornwall office at 3:45 p.m. Received here at 3:58 p.m. To Williamson, 4 Whitechapel Place. Lord Mayor offered £500 apprehension Whitechapel murderer. Bullying. It carries an annotation below, sent out by Mr. Pemberton to be made official and put up. Then there follows a draft for approval of a reply to Mr. Lusk. Draft for approval, sir. I am directed by the Secretary of State to thank you for the suggestion in your letter of the 7th instant on the subject of the recent Whitechapel murders, and to say in reply that from the first, the S of S has had under consideration the question of granting a pardon to persons not actually inserted accomplices. It is obvious that not only make to such a grant there's the way this is reading, it's literally everything. So it's the screw ups, it's wrong words spelled, it's all raw, if that makes sense. It is obvious that not only make to such a grant be granted to persons who have not been concerned in contriving or in actually committing the murders has been from the first under the consideration of the Secretary of State, but that the information obtained has not been such as to appear to him to render such a course at present either expedient or justifiable. But the expediency or propriety of making the offer must largely depend on the nature of the information received from day to day, which is being carefully watched with a view to determine that question. With regard to the offer of a reward and the SOFS, the Secretary of State, has, under the existing circumstances, nothing to add to his former reply. I am George Lusk, 1 Alderley Road, Mile End. There are marginal notes to the above letter as follows. Yeah, they're weird. It's just dates, Mr. Matthews, HM. The next file cover also relates to Mr. Lusk, dated 7th October 1888. And this is to Mr. George Lusk, and it's about the East End murders. On behalf of the Committee of Inhabitants of the East End, points out that these crimes are absolutely unique, and that the murderer or murderers may possibly continue to be more than a match for Scotland Yard and Old Jewry combined. Calls attention to the fact that the only means left untried for the detection of the murderer has been the offer of government reward, with the offer of a free pardon to any person not the real assassin. To be copied. Copy made. There's no reason to suspect an accomplice, quite the reverse. I therefore see no good in offering a pardon to any person not the real assassin. The question of reward has already been settled in the negative. Mr. Matthews, before answering further, send copy to Commissioner and request him to inform the S of the S, I think the Secretary of State, whether any useful result would be produced, in his opinion, by the offer of a pardon to accomplices. So it's all about reward, and it's all about a pardon, apparently. So this letter from George Lusk, dated 7th October 1888, is then annexed to the Secretary of State for the Home Department. The East End murders. I have to acknowledge the receipt of a communication from the Home Office dated the 6th instant, in which it stated that although no effort or expense should be spared in endeavoring to discover the person guilty of these atrocious murders, you are unable to advise Her Majesty that in your beliefs the ends. Why would you put that twice? If you are unable to advise Her Majesty that in your beliefs the ends of justice will be promoted by any departure from the direction already announced. In reply to such communication, I beg to thank you on behalf of my committee for your kindness in laying my petition before Her Majesty the Queen, and to state that inhabitants of Whitechapel and the East End districts of London generally believe that the police authorities are sparing neither trouble nor expense in attempting to secure the murderer. At the same time, however, it is my duty humbly to point out that the present series of murders is absolutely unique in the annals of crime. That the cunning, astuteness, and determination of the murderer has hitherto been, and maybe, possibly, still continue to be, more than a match for Scotland Yard and Old Jewry combined, and that all ordinary means of detection have failed. This being so, I venture most respectfully to call your attention to the fact that the only means left untried for the detection for the murder has been the offer of a government reward. Just give it to him already. I don't understand this. Rewards are offered from other quarters, including the corporation of the City of London, but in neither of these instances can a pardon be extended to an accomplice. Therefore, the value of these offers are considerably less than that of a government proclamation of a really substantial reward with the extension of a free pardon to any person not the actual assassin. I have the honor to be, Right Honorable Sir, your very obedient humble servant, George Lusk. The next file cover, dated 9th October 1888, as follows. The within decisions was arrived at the after conference with Sir C. Warren and Mr. Anderson. There then follows a note. Home Office, Whitehall. Okay. Say to Mr. Lusk that the expediency of granting a reward, pardon to persons not actually concerned in the commission of the murders and not implicated in the terrible guilt of contriving or abetting them, has been more than once under the consideration of the Secretary of State, and that the information at present in his possession has not so far been such as to induce him to offer one. With regard to the offer of reward, the Secretary of State has nothing to add to his former reply in the present state of the case under investigation. I just don't understand this. Then there follows a note from Godfrey Lushington to Henry Matthews, dated 10th October 1888. Mr. Matthews, this letter from the Commissioner and letter from Mr. Lusk, on which it is founded, give you an opportunity to offer a pardon if you are so inclined. Offering a pardon is not open to the same objections as offering a reward, nor has the Secretary of State done anything to commit himself to refuse to offer a pardon. The mere lapse of time occasions no difficulty, for in a crime of this atrocious character, it is desirable that if a possible person, no person, even an accessory, after the fact, should receive a pardon. A pardon, therefore, is only offered when it is pretty clear that the efforts of the police to detect the crime have been unavailing. And if the Secretary of State does not now offer a pardon, his action will, of course, be open to the criticism that he has declined to take a step recommended by the Commissioner. On the other hand, the Commissioner's letter does not appear to me to throw any new light on the case or to suggest the probability that the offer of a pardon will lead to a discovery. His recommendation is based on a mere supposition. Many, one of many suppositions which had occurred to everybody from the beginning. Then, as to the effect to the public mind, the offer of a pardon will not allay the excitement of the public, who, on the contrary, will wrongly infer that the view of the Home Office is that the murderer had an accomplice, and this will make the outrages appear of a far more grave character. Nor will the offer of a pardon restore confidence in the police. It will be accepted as an admission of their failure to detect the crime. It will provoke renewed attention to the action of the Home Office, and hostile critics are sure to say that the step, if taken, ought to have been taken earlier. I get that. In my opinion, it would be better for the Secretary of State not to grant offer of a pardon, taking his stand on the ground that he has held from the first that it is not a case in which the offer of a pardon is appropriate. It is quite possible, however, that you may be of a different opinion. GL. This was written October 10th, 1888. This is followed by another note, writing to Mr. Lusk. Thank him for his letter. Say that the advisability question of granting a pardon to persons not actually concerned in the contriving or committing the murders has been from the first under the consideration of the Secretary of State, but that the information hitherto obtained has not been such as to appear to him to render such recourse at present either expedient or justifiable. With regard to the offer of a reward, the Secretary of State has, under the existing circumstances, nothing to add for his former reply. There is then annexed the letter dated 9th October 1888 from Sir Charles Warren. Sir, in reply to your immediate letter, just received on the subject of Mr. Lusk's proposal as to a pardon to accomplices of the Whitechapel murders, I have to state, for the information of the Secretary of State, that during the last 3 or 4 days, I have been coming to the conclusion that useful results will be produced by the offer of a pardon to accomplices. Definitely don't need a pardon. Among the variety of theories, there is the possibility that the murderer is someone who, during the day time, is sane, but who, at certain periods, is overbalanced in his mind. And I think it possible that that his relatives or neighbors may possibly be aware of the peculiarities and may have gradually, unwittingly slid into the position of being accomplices and may be hopeless of any escape without a free pardon. On the other hand, if it is the work of a gang in which only one actually commits the murder, the free pardon to the accomplice may make the difference of information being obtained. As a striking commentary on this matter, I have today received a letter from a person asserting himself to be an accomplice and asking for a free pardon, and I am commencing a communication with him through the advertisement in a journal. This letter is probably a hoax, for we have received scores of hoaxing letters, but on the other hand, it may be a bona fide letter, and if so, I feel what a great, very great loss it would be to the discovery of the murderer by omitting to offer the pardon, and I cannot see what harm could be done in this or any future case by offering a pardon. I am, sir, your most obedient servant, Charles Warren. Okay, so there's another one. So this letter enclosed reads, Office of the Board of Works, Whitechapel District Number 15, Great Alley Street, Whitechapel, 2nd October 1888. Sir, at a meeting of the Board of Works for the Whitechapel District, a resolution was passed of which the following is a copy. That this board regards with horror and alarm the several atrocious murders recently perpetrated within the district of the Whitechapel and its vicinity, and calls upon Sir Charles Warren so to regulate and strengthen the police force in the neighborhood to guard against any repetition of such atrocities. And by direction of the board, the copy resolution is forwarded to you in the hope that it will receive your favorable consideration. I am, sir, your obedient servant, Alfred Turner. He was a clerk. Okay, what is this? A home office file cover. Okay. Acknowledge and say Secretary of State shares the feelings of the vestry in regard to these murders that the police have instructions to exercise every power in their possession in their efforts to discover the murderer, and that the Secretary of State, after personal conference with the commissioner, in which all the difficulties of case have been fully discussed, is satisfied that no available means will be spared of tracing the offender and bringing him to justice. See explanation by Mr. Lushington within as to difference between printed and actual letter. The letter from the vestry clerk and the resolution appears at FF 6667 worded as follows. To the Right Honorable Henry Matthews MP. Sir, I have the honor to send you the other side copy of the resolution passed at a meeting of vestrymen of the parish St. Mary Whitechapel held on the 3rd. I am, sir, your humble obedient servant, Thomas D. Metcalf, and he's the vestry clerk. Home Office Whitechapel. No. At a meeting of the vestrymen, one of the parish of St. Mary Whitechapel held on the 3rd day of October 1888, the following resolution was passed. It was moved, second, and resolved that this vestry desires to express its sorrow at the diabolical murders which have lately been committed in East London, and to urge Her Majesty's government to use their utmost efforts to discover the criminals. I certify the above to be a true extract from the minutes. The minutes is the newspaper. Thomas D. Metcalf, vestry clerk. The letter of 6th October 1888 referred to above as follows. Sir, I am directed by the Secretary of State to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of the 4th instant, forwarding a copy of a resolution of the vestry of the parish of St. Mary Whitechapel, expressing sorrow at the recent murders in the east of London, urging the government to use their utmost endeavor to discover the criminals. And I am to state that Mr. Matthews shares the feelings of the vestry with regard to these murders, that the police have instructions to exercise every power they possess in their efforts to discover the murderer, and that the Secretary of State, after personal conference with the Commissioner, in which all the difficulties of the case have been fully discussed, is satisfied that no means will be spared, in tracing the offender and bringing him to justice. I am, sir, your obedient servant. Then the clerk to the vestry of the parish of St. Mary Whitechapel. This says, the report comparing the above letter with a copy of it printed in the Daily News and Pall Mall Gazette is included as follows. Mr. Matthews, please look at the Home Office letters to the vestry clerk of Whitechapel, as set out at length in the Daily News of Friday, and partially, but with comments, in the Pall Mall Gazette of today, and compare it with the copy enclosed of the letter which was actually written from the HO. You will observe various discrepancies. Newspaper version, the HO version, it's just shows dates. Yes, they literally show everything. Um, in the body of the letter, it says East End, a London criminal. I am instructed to state, and that he was given directions, and that the police have instructions and every power they possess, and even to use an amount of discretion with regard to suspected persons in their efforts to discover the criminal. I am for the state of Secretary of State, commissioners of police, at which the whole of the difficult. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just a bunch of, I don't know how to explain it, like side notes. See what I mean? So it's not really. There's one from the HO version, then there's the newspaper version. So, like the newspaper says, is satisfied that no means have been or will be spared. And then from HO version, it says, is satisfied that no means will be spared. It's just same thing, but worded differently in some sentences. We are unable to explain these variations, but suppose them due to somebody having dictated the terms of the HO letter to shorthand notes, who took them down incorrectly and afterwards worded up the material he had, but you will probably think it unadvisable to correct them. It would be injurious to the commissioner to do so, but it is well for you to know that you did not use the words attributed to you. We have written today to the commissioner to remind him to send to HO a report of the measures taken to detect the persons who committed the murder. He has also not answered on paper the 3 questions you put to him in your private letter, in which he answered verbally to you. I have no copy of that letter, so could not remind him of it. This was written the 13th of October. Copy by Mr. Bryce is with the other papers. Memo on rewards, hardcore's note on there. There is some correspondence between Charles Warren and the Home Office, and this is the cover page as follows. Yeah, it just says reports on J.W. Ellis, letters stating he is prepared to take any measures possible, provided HM government will support him, but points out the risk entailed on the men who search. And then minutes, that newspaper says, see copy of letter within from Secretary of State of the 5th as to the course he proposed. Mr. Lushington, see Secretary of State, minute within. I do not know if Sir C. Warren had reported privately to the Secretary of State. If not, shall a reminder be sent? There's then a Home Office note on headed paper as follows. The letter of Sir J. Whittaker Atlas MP, which has not been returned, recommended the drawing of a cordon of police around Whitechapel and a compulsory house-to-house search. It is now here with HM. The letter from Sir J. Whittaker Ellis appears as follows. My dear Matthews, there's no doubt but that the Whitechapel murderer remains in the neighborhood. Draw a excuse me. Sorry. Draw a cordon of half a mile around the center and search every house. This would surely unearth him. It is a strong thing to do, but I should think that occasion never before arose. I should say he is an American slaughterman, an occupation largely followed in South America. Yours truly, J. Whittaker Ellis. Henry Matthews. That was the end. Okay, so there's a letter from Sir Charles Warren dated 4th October 1888. And this reads, Dear Mr. Ruggles Bryce, I return Sir W. Ellis' letter and am quite prepared to take the responsibility of adopting the most drastic or arbitrary measures that the Secretary of State can name, which would further the securing of the murderer, however illegal they may be, provided HM Governor will support me. But I must observe that the Secretary of State cannot authorize me to do an illegal action, and that the full responsibility will always rest on me over the police constables for anything done. All I want is to ensure that the government will identify us for our actions, which must necessarily be adapted to the circumstances of the case. The exact course of which cannot be always foreseen. I have been accustomed to work under such circumstances in what were nearly civil wars, and then the government passed acts for those who have gone beyond the law. 3 weeks ago, I did not think the public would have acquiesced in any illegal action, but now I think they would welcome anything which shows activity and enterprise. Of course, the danger of taking such a course as that proposed by Sir W. Ellis is that if we did not find the murderer, our action would be condemned, and there's the danger that an illegal act of such a character might bond the Social Democrats together to resist the police, and I might be then said to have caused a serious riot. Hmm. I think I may say without hesitation that those houses could not be searched illegally without violent resisting and bloodshed and certainty of one or more police officers being killed. And the question is whether it was worth while losing the lives of several of the community and risking serious riot in order to search for one murderer whose whereabouts is not known. I have ascertained from Mr. Williamson that he thinks that though under certain circumstances, such action may be adopted or should be not be justified at present in doing to such an illegal act. We have in times past done such a thing on very much smaller scale, but when we had certain information that a person was concealed in the house. And then it says here 86, 87 not found. Resumed on 88. In this matter, I have not only myself to think of, but the lives and protection of 12,000 men, and any one of whom might be hanged if a death occurred in entering a house illegally. Yours truly, Charles Warren. Dear Sir Charles, R.B. has forwarded me the letter of the 4th October, with Sir I. Ellis letter to suggestion in which is open to your observation and is too sweeping. I thought my own suggestion of last Wednesday more practical. Take all houses in a given area which appear suspicious upon the best inquiry your detectives can make. Search all those, which the owners or persons in charge will allow you to search. Where leave is refused, apply to magistrate for a search warrant on the ground that it is probable or possible that the murder may be there. If search warrants are refused, you can only keep the houses under observation. I should be glad now that the week is closing of a report of all the measures that have been taken for arresting the criminal and of the results. Have any of the doctors examined the eyes of the murdered woman? Yours truly, H.M. I shall be very glad to hear whether Mr. Anderson's health has permitted him to resume his duties. There's then a note to Charles Murdoch from Ruggles Bryce, dated 8th October, 1888. Mr. Murdoch, I showed this to Mr. Lushington. It should be made official and put up. So on Monday, 8th October, 1888, the Times reported East End murders. Fears were expressed among the police on Saturday that the night would not pass without some startling occurrence, and the most extraordinary precautions were taken in consequence. It must not be supposed that the precautions taken applied to only the East End of London. It is fully understood that the murderer, finding his favorite haunt too hot for him, may transfer his operations to another district, and arrangements have been made accordingly. The parks are especially paroled, and the police, even in the most outlying districts, are keenly alive to the necessities of the situation. Having efficiently, sorry, provided for the safeguarding of other portions of the large area under his jurisdiction, Sir Charles Warren has sent every available man into the East End district. These, together with a large body of city detectives, are now on duty, and will remain in the streets throughout the night. Most of the men were on duty all last night, and the work has been found very harassing. But every man has entered heartily into the work, and not a murmur has been heard from any of the officers. They are on their mettle, and if I don't know what that means. If zeal were the one thing needed to hunt down the murderer, his capture would be assured. Yesterday evening, all was quiet in the district, and the excitement had somewhat subsided. Nevertheless, the police and the local vigilance committee had by no means relaxed their watchfulness, and inhabitants of the district, disregarding the improbability of the murderer risking his freedom under these circumstances, still appeared to expect the early commission of a new crime. During Saturday night and the early hours of Sunday morning, several persons were arrested and detained at local police stations until all the circumstances in connection with their apprehension were thoroughly sifted. Several of these were given into custody on grounds which proved on inquiry to be flimsy and even foolish, and the police have in consequence been put to a good deal of trouble without any corresponding result. It seemed at times as if every person in the streets were suspicious of everyone else he met, as if it were a race between them who should first inform against his neighbor. Alfred Napier Blanchard, who described himself as a canvasser residing at Handsworth, was charged at Birmingham on Saturday, on his own confession, with having committed the Whitechapel atrocities. He had been arrested in consequence of a commercial statement which he made in a public house of the manner in which he had effected the murders. This must be the guy from the beginning, and I was reading. He now denied all knowledge of the matter and said he had spoken under excitement, caused by reading about the murders and heavy drinking. The bench declined to release him, however, till today, in order to allow time for inquiries. I don't think he's the one. Up to a late hour last night, no important arrest has been reported in connection with the murders at the East End at any of the city police stations. Many communications continue to be received at Scotland Yard and made by the city police describing persons who have been seen in various parts of the country whose conduct is suspicious or who are supposed to resemble the man seen talking to the victim of the Berners Street murder on the night of her assassination. According to a Ryder telegram from New York, the New York Herald declares that the seaman named Dodge, who recently stated that a Malay whom he met in London threatened to murder a number of Whitechapel women for robbing him, said he knew the street where the Malay stayed, but that he would not divulge the name until he learnt what chance there was of a reward. He stated, however, that the street was not far from the East India Dock Road, but he was not certain about the house where the man lived. Another seaman said he thought the Malay was now on a vessel plying in the North Sea. All right, that was chapter 11. We still got a few more to go. Man, I'm not quite halfway there, but almost. Almost. Well, I hope you enjoyed. Sorry it took me so long to read that, but I've been busy, then I've gotten sick, but at least, I mean, I'm trying. At least I make a video every day, right? Trying. All right, I hope you guys have a great night. And I got still a couple more things to read. Okay, I'll do that. And then Wednesdays, we're going to do the Jeff Lawrence Daughters book, I think. All right, you guys have a great night, and I'll talk to you again. Bye.